Have you ever stopped to think about the power of biblical stories and the impact they can have on your life? These narratives transcend time, offering lessons that not only shaped history, but continue to transform lives today. Whether it's facing monumental challenges like David defeating Goliath or rebuilding life after great adversity, as Noah did after the flood, the Bible is full of profound teachings. And the most amazing part? These stories are much more than ancient accounts. They are direct invitations to reflect, act, and renew our faith, courage, and purpose. What can we learn about trust from Abraham? How can we apply Joseph's wisdom when dealing with betrayal and life's unexpected twists? Each character, each event carries practical lessons that can reshape how we approach our daily struggles. Get ready to dive into a world of divine wisdom, where the impossible becomes possible and faith overcomes even the most insurmountable barriers. Together, let's explore how these stories can inspire new attitudes and shed light on our journeys. Are you ready to discover the eternal impact of these divine revelations? Noah lived in a time when corruption reigned. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight and was full of violence. Genesis 6:11. Yet he was called to be an example of righteousness. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked faithfully with God. Genesis 6:9. God commanded him to build an ark. Make yourself an ark of cypress wood, 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high. Genesis 6:14-15. This mission required unwavering faith and complete obedience. During the ark's construction, Noah endured the ridicule of his contemporaries. Noah did everything just as God commanded him. Genesis 6:22. His determination teaches us to persevere even when others fail to understand our purpose. Finally, the rain came. For 40 days and 40 nights, the rain fell on the earth. Genesis 7:12. Fulfilling God's word. The waters prevailed for 150 days. The waters flooded the earth for 150 days. Genesis 7:24. Until God remembered Noah. But God remembered Noah and all the wild animals and the livestock that were with him in the ark. And he sent a wind over the earth, and the waters receded. Genesis 8:1. Noah sent out a dove, which returned with an olive leaf. When the dove returned to him in the evening, there in its beak was a freshly plucked olive leaf. Genesis 8:11. Upon leaving the ark, Noah offered a sacrifice of gratitude. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord. Genesis 8:20. And God established his covenant. I have set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Genesis 9:13. The rainbow became an eternal symbol of hope and renewal, reminding us of God's faithfulness. This story teaches us about obedience, resilience, and trust in God's plan. Just as Noah was called to build an ark, we are invited to build our spiritual arks, preparing ourselves for life's challenges. God continues to sustain us as he did Noah, with promises of mercy and purpose. Abraham was called by God to leave his land and family. Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. Genesis 12:1. Without hesitation he obeyed, trusting in God's promises. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great. Genesis 12:2. His faith was so strong that he set out without knowing his destination. Hebrews 11:8. God reaffirmed his covenant with Abraham, promising him countless descendants. Look up at the sky and count the stars. If indeed you can count them, so shall your offspring be. Genesis 15:5. Even in the face of natural impossibilities, such as his advanced age, Abram believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. Genesis 15:6. This act of faith remains an eternal example. The greatest test came when God asked Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac. Take your son, your only son whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering. Genesis 22:2. Abraham climbed Mount Moriah, carrying the wood and his trust in God. God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering. Genesis 22:8. At the decisive moment, an angel intervened, and a ram was provided as a substitute. Genesis 22:13. After this test, God reaffirmed his promise. I swear by myself, declares the Lord, that because you have done this, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky. Genesis 22:16, 17. This story teaches us that obedience and faith in God open doors to abundant blessings, even in moments of great sacrifice. Abraham not only received God's promises, but also began to see their fulfillment in Isaac. He left a legacy of faith that continues to impact generations today. Like Abraham, we are called to trust God, even when the path is uncertain, knowing that his promises are always fulfilled. Ready to hear another example of obedience and courage? Moses was called by God to lead the Israelites to freedom in one of the most dramatic moments in biblical history. While tending his flock, he encountered a burning bush that did not consume. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Exodus 3:5. God revealed his plan. I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt, and I have come down to rescue them. Exodus 3:7-8. Hesitant at first, Moses was reassured by God's promise, I will be with you. Exodus 3:12. The 10 plagues of Egypt were powerful demonstrations of God's might, challenging Egypt's gods and Pharaoh's resistance. From turning the Nile's water into blood, Exodus 7:20, to the death of the firstborn, Exodus 12:29, each plague struck against oppression. The Passover, instituted during this time, symbolized divine protection. When I see the blood, I will pass over you. Exodus 12:13. The crossing of the Red Sea was a miraculous event marking the beginning of liberation. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind. Exodus 14:21. The Egyptian army was defeated as the waters returned. That day the Lord saved Israel from the hands of the Egyptians. Exodus 14:30. This event teaches us that God always makes a way, even when there seems to be no escape. At Mount Sinai, God gave Moses the 10 Commandments, establishing fundamental principles for worship and moral living. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. Exodus 22. This covenant was a turning point for Israel and continues to influence ethical values to this day. Despite challenges like the constant complaints of the people, Moses remained steadfast in his leadership. God provided manna in the wilderness to sustain the Israelites. I will rain down bread from heaven for you. Exodus 16:4. This divine provision reminds us that God cares for his promises, guiding and sustaining us even in the hardest times. Ready to discover how God continues to establish covenants with humanity? After the flood, God established an eternal covenant with Noah and all creation. He declared, I now establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you. Genesis 9:9. This promise was not only for humanity but also for all living creatures, and with every living creature that was with you, the birds, the livestock, and all the wild animals. Genesis 9:10. It was a commitment to preserve life on earth. The rainbow was designated as the sign of this covenant. Whenever the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and all living creatures. Genesis 9:14, 16. This universal symbol is a constant reminder that despite human failings, God remains faithful to his promises. Every time we see it, we are invited to reflect on renewal and the hope it represents. This covenant shows the merciful heart of God. Even after the judgment of the flood, he chose to sustain humanity. It's like when we make grave mistakes but are given a second chance. This pact teaches us to value the present and care for creation, as we are co-responsible for this divine relationship. Beyond being a symbol of hope, the rainbow inspires us to remember the past and look to the future with faith. Just as God promised never to destroy the earth with a flood again, He continues to show patience and love for humanity. This covenant doesn't rely on human perfection, but on divine faithfulness. God's covenant with Noah was a milestone in the history of faith and remains relevant today. It reminds us that God is always seeking to restore His connection with His creatures. However, this wasn't the only significant covenant in the biblical narrative. Let's now turn to the story of a young man who, with faith and resilience, transformed his life and became a key figure in God's plan. Do you know Joseph? Joseph, the beloved son of Jacob, was betrayed by his brothers and sold as a slave. So they sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites. Genesis 37:28. Even amidst adversity, God was with him. The Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered. Genesis 39:2. In Potiphar's house, Joseph stood out for his integrity and dedication, but he was unjustly imprisoned after a false accusation. Genesis 39:20. In prison, Joseph continued to demonstrate his faith by interpreting dreams. He told the cupbearer and baker, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." Genesis 48. This ability caught Pharaoh's attention, and Joseph was summoned to interpret Pharaoh's own dreams. Joseph revealed that Egypt would face 7 years of abundance, followed by 7 years of famine. Genesis 41:29-30. Pharaoh was impressed and appointed Joseph as governor of Egypt. "Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you." Genesis 41:40. Joseph managed resources during the years of abundance, saving not only Egypt but also neighboring nations from famine. This story teaches us that God can use our abilities to impact many lives, even in difficult times. When his brothers came to buy food, Joseph saw the opportunity for reconciliation. He revealed his identity with tears and said, "God sent me ahead of you to preserve life." Genesis 45:5. His forgiveness of his brothers exemplifies divine grace and the power to overcome bitterness, transforming evil into good. Joseph's life shows that God turns adversity into purpose. He not only saved his family from famine, but also ensured the continuity of the lineage that would bring forth the Messiah. His story is a powerful reminder that even in the most difficult moments, God is orchestrating a greater plan. But how do you overcome seemingly impossible challenges, like a young shepherd did when facing a giant? Let's find out. David, a young shepherd, faced one of the greatest challenges of his life when Goliath, a Philistine giant, defied the army of Israel. "Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects." 1 Samuel 17:8-9. While the soldiers trembled in fear, David displayed unwavering courage. "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" 1 Samuel 17:26. David rejected the armor offered by Saul and decided to fight with the tools he was familiar with, a sling and 5 smooth stones. 1 Samuel 17:40. He declared his trust in God as he confronted Goliath. "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty." 1 Samuel 17:45. This statement teaches us that true strength lies in faith, not in human weapons. The battle was quick but decisive. David launched a stone that struck Goliath's forehead, bringing him down. David ran and stood over him. He took hold of the Philistine's sword and drew it from the sheath. After he killed him, he cut off his head with the sword. 1 Samuel 17:49-51. This triumph was more than a military victory. It was a demonstration of God's power working through those who trust in him. David's courage inspired the people of Israel, who pursued and defeated the Philistines after Goliath's fall. 1 Samuel 17:52. This example reminds us that our acts of faith can motivate and encourage others. How often do we face our own giants and forget that God is with us every step of the way? David teaches us that with faith and determination, it is possible to overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges. His story doesn't end here. He would go on to become one of Israel's greatest kings. But his journey begins with a simple lesson. God uses the small and humble to accomplish great things. Speaking of greatness, no one embodied it more than Jesus Christ. Want to know how? Jesus Christ is the central figure of the entire Bible, whose life, death, and resurrection changed the course of history. He was born in humility, fulfilling prophecy. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. Matthew 2:6. His mission began with baptism by John the Baptist. This is my Son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased. Matthew 3:17. The miracles of Jesus demonstrated his divine power and compassion. He turned water into wine at the wedding in Cana. John 2:9-10. Multiplied loaves and fishes to feed a crowd of 5,000, Matthew 14:19-21, and healed the blind Bartimaeus. Go, your faith has healed you, Mark 10:52. These acts revealed him as the fulfillment of God's promises to humanity. Jesus taught through parables that touched people's hearts. The parable of the Good Samaritan, Luke 10:30-37, challenges us to love our neighbor without prejudice, while the parable of the prodigal son, Luke 15:11-32, teaches us about forgiveness and the grace of our Heavenly Father. His words carried authority. I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. John 14:6. His death was the greatest act of love and redemption. He was crucified for the sins of the world, but he was pierced for our transgressions. Isaiah 53:5. Even on the cross, he showed mercy, saying, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. Luke 23:34. His resurrection on the third day was the final victory over sin and death. He is not here, he has risen. Luke 24:6. Jesus not only impacted his generation but continues to transform lives today. He calls us to follow him with faith and trust. Whoever believes and is baptized will be saved. Mark 16:16. His story is the culmination of God's plan for humanity's redemption and invites us to live lives of love, forgiveness, and purpose. This challenges us to ask ourselves, how can we follow his steps and make an impact on the world around us? Now that you've immersed yourself in the Bible's most powerful stories, take a moment to reflect. How can these revelations transform your life? Are you building your arcs to face challenges? Are you exercising faith like Abraham to walk into the unknown? Or maybe you need David's courage to confront the giants in your path. The Bible is not just a book of stories. It is a guide to living with purpose, courage, and hope. What steps can you take today to apply these lessons in your daily life? How can you become the change you wish to see in the world? Remember, God has a plan for each of us. Are you willing to trust and act even when everything seems uncertain? Whoever you are or wherever you may be, the stories of Noah, Abraham, Moses, Joseph, David, and Jesus are invitations to transformation. Start with small acts of faith, forgiveness, and love. Look at challenges as opportunities for growth and strengthen your connection with God. Now, how about continuing this journey? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any content like this. Together, let's dive deeper into the teachings that can change lives. Don't miss the chance to be inspired and inspire others.